Hello and welcome to this session on Carbon Tunnel Vision at Festival of Place Climate Resilience 2023. My name is Christine Murray. I'm the founding director of the Festival of Place and the developer. So much of this event is about making the right call, and cutting carbon is a simple concept, but there are times when we need to take a holistic and not simplistic view, and our next speaker will be sharing insights on how to ensure we don't get carbon tunnel vision. Amanda Skeldon, JLL's Director of Climate and Nature, was recommended to me as a powerhouse in evidence-based decision-making. Sitting within the corporate sustainability team, she leads on JLL's climate action work within the UK, incorporating net zero carbon, climate risk, circularity, and nature. Prior to joining JLL, Amanda worked for Business in the Community and was a co-lead on the cross-sector EU-funded Ignition project, which we heard about in our last session with Hannah. So it's focused on developing innovative financing models for urban nature-based solutions. So welcome, Amanda. It's really great to have you here.
Thanks so much, Christine. And yeah, it follows on beautifully. Anyone who has been listening to Hannah, hopefully this will move together seamlessly. So thank you very much for inviting me to join you.
Fantastic. Well, I'll invite you to share your slides. And while you do that, I'm going to remind our audience to share their thoughts and comments in the chat, and that there is a Q&A bubble for their questions. We will be taking your questions at the end of the session, but you can put them in there at any time during the talk. That looks like fantastic. We're ready to go.
Perfect. Brilliant. And thank you so much. Firstly, apologies to people. I am slightly full of cold and juggling a couple of screens. So if I look slightly distracted, it will either be cold or that I'm trying to look at two screens at once. Apologies, but hopefully we can get through both of this together. Thank you so much for the intro. I hope that was useful. So JLL is a global real estate company, and we support our clients with anything to do with buildings. So anything from investment through to planning, and from fit out through to portfolio management. And I've got quite a broad background. As Christine said, I worked for Business in the Community for many years, and I've worked with a whole range of businesses, particularly focused on nature, but also on broader sustainability strategies. So as we said, today, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about overcoming carbon tunnel vision and developing holistic climate action plans. So what I'm going to cover in the session today is what carbon tunnel vision is, how we can look beyond carbon, the benefits of a holistic climate action plan, how you can get started, and then I will open up for questions on anything that we've covered. So, first of all, what is carbon tunnel vision? So this is a concept that I learned about in a presentation a while back, probably earlier this year. And it's a concept that many businesses and organizations are focusing purely on reducing carbon emissions in their commitment to sustainability at the exclusion of everything else. And as a challenge, this has arisen for a variety of reasons. Almost all businesses are looking at sustainability at some level now, and increased regulations, laws, and policies are typically directed towards the effects of carbon. So mandating that organizations disclose their carbon footprint and undertake measures to reduce it. So consequently, carbon emissions have become the primary focal point in their approach towards sustainability. And also, in some ways, carbon reduction initiatives are often more straightforward to implement than other sustainability approaches, but it can lead to missing really key metrics and also focusing purely on compliance rather than looking at how you can drive significant sustainability progress. So the first thing I do want to make a point of is carbon is really important. It's really, really important. The UK built environment is responsible for 25% of carbon emissions. So it's really clear that we've got a huge role to play in achieving the UK's net zero ambition. And achieving net zero is hard. I know I just said that it's comparatively easy next to some areas of sustainability, but it's still hard. For example, reducing embodied carbon in construction and fit out is really hard, but it's a vital part of the transition. Reducing operational emissions is hard, particularly when we take into account the pace of electrical infrastructure development, dated planning policies and frameworks, aging buildings, and a lack in some of the skills needed to drive forward the energy efficient retrofit at the pace that we really need. And offsets are a minefield for many reasons. So it is there is so much to have a look at, and with so much to navigate, it's no wonder that many businesses can't see beyond carbon in their sustainability plans. But this blinkered view not only means that wider sustainability metrics, ambitions, and needs are being missed, it also means that a whole range of opportunities are being missed. And I do want to reiterate, carbon is important. We need to decarbonise. I was talking with Chris Stark from the Climate Change Committee last week, and he made it really clear that businesses and government both need to significantly accelerate the pace of decarbonisation to ensure that we stay anywhere near a 2-degree world. But it isn't enough. He also stressed the fact that we can't now just focus on net zero. We've got to a point where we can't ignore the need to build resilience. And the damage we're doing to biodiversity also needs to be addressed if we want to ensure a secure future. So we need to take action that ensures we have resilient, green, accessible, healthy places to live, work, and play. And that means that we need sustainability plans and climate action plans that go beyond carbon. They also need to consider resource use, resilience, both personal and physical resilience to the effects of climate change, and resilience to changing business models, policy and consumer and employee expectations. We need to address the biodiversity crisis. We need to incorporate health and well-being into this, and we really need to look at inclusivity. Now, I know we can't do everything. It is really hard. There is so much going on and so many expectations on businesses. So whether that's businesses, local government, community groups, or not-for-profits, everyone has limited resources. And it is hard. But from my perspective, there are 2 fundamental reasons why we need to expand our view beyond carbon tunnel vision. And I'm going to be a bit blunt on the first one, but firstly, because if we don't, we're stuffed. It's not a scientific term, but it's kind of where we are. We need to find a way to exist within the limitations of a finite world and the scientific systems that govern that. We are a part of nature. And there's a David Attenborough quote that gets used an awful lot, but I don't think it's possible to overemphasize the point. And that is that anyone who thinks you can have infinite growth in a finite environment is either a madman or an economist. So if we don't look at how we manage our resource use, how we impact on nature, and how we create symbiotic, resilient places to live, we face a really bleak future. Now, the second more optimistic reason that we need to look beyond carbon is the opportunities and rewards of taking a holistic approach to climate action are so many and varied. And fundamentally, this is the space that I'm going to try and focus on particularly today. But just before I do, I'm going to take one more minute to kind of focus on that risk space. The risk of maintaining carbon tunnel vision and not expanding our worldview to act more broadly is huge and will impact on all areas of life. Even if we manage to limit global warming to 2 degrees or even 1.5 ambitiously, we will see more extreme weather, storms, heat waves and droughts. And Hannah was just talking about the impact of heat for those of you who are on that session as well. And as a result of this weather, we risk coastal and inland flooding, we risk wildfires. We also risk damage to the natural environment that then can result in carbon sinks becoming carbon sources. So peatlands, mangroves, woodlands that should be capturing carbon for us will start releasing it back into the environment. We also risk impacts on our supply chain, which impact resource security, and very specifically food security. We risk negative impacts on health and well-being, both mental and physical. And in the built environment, we risk stranded assets. That's buildings that are no longer fit for purpose, either because they don't meet minimum legal standards, or fundamentally they're not resilient to the environment that they exist within. And we risk inequity. Those in the global north, those with more disposable income, will be least affected by the impacts of climate change. And those with the least resilience will feel the greatest impact. But I did promise I will focus on the optimistic side of this. So let's have a look at the benefits of taking a holistic approach to climate action planning. A broader perspective can help you accelerate and increase the efficacy of your net zero transition. So ensuring resilience and using nature-based solutions can contribute to your net zero transition. It can increase asset value. So for built assets, looking at circularity, for example, during construction, retrofit and fit out, or looking at how you can incorporate nature-based solutions, can really increase the value and liquidity of that asset. In other words, how desirable and easy it is to sell. So you can also reduce embodied carbon through taking a more circular approach to resource use. Design, procurement models and waste, all of those things will actually help that holistic carbon transition. You also get the chance to reconsider your business models and to ensure that they are resilient, both to the physical and transitional risks associated with climate change. And this can also trigger new diverse business models and income streams. The holistic approach also helps identify cost-effective solutions. This is something Hannah touched on in her session as well. So if you look at climate action and sustainability in the round, it enables you to identify solutions that solve multiple problems or deliver multiple benefits, all within one action. So as an example, at the moment, there's a lot of pressure and movement towards retrofitting our existing building stock. And we're doing that to increase efficiency, energy efficiency, and to reduce carbon emissions. But if we do that with just that one goal in mind, then we miss the opportunity to enhance nature and biodiversity at a minimal additional cost. There's a strong chance that there will be requirements not far down the line around nature and biodiversity. And if we don't look at building those into it now, we take the risk that 3 years, 5 years down the line, we're going to have to do a whole new phase of retrofit at significant additional cost. The next 2 points on here are very much about placemaking, and taking a holistic approach to sustainability really enables you to create vibrant, resilient places that nurture community cohesion, enhance well-being, and create spaces that people want to live, work, and play in. And finally, done well with the engagement of diverse stakeholders, this can also really increase the chance of the transition to the net zero being a just and equitable one. So I'm just going to take a minute and go through where we've got to within JLL and our approach to climate action. It's not the only one, but hopefully it gives you a perspective of how you can look at this in a more holistic approach. Now, bearing in mind, this is part of a wider sustainability strategy that also encompasses diversity, inclusion, social value, purpose, and much more. I'm just going to focus on the E of an ESG strategy today, so the environmental side. And within that, within our climate action plan, we focus on 4 key areas. So net zero carbon is in there. It is fundamentally our North Star, is making sure that we can achieve net zero by 2040. But then we also look at climate risk and resilience. So building resilience to the effect of climate change across our own and our clients' estates. We look at the circular economy and making sure that we're minimizing resource consumption, maximizing the value of all the materials that we use, and supporting the restoration of natural systems, which also then links into the nature and biodiversity aspect. So we're looking at how we protect the resources on which all life depends and restore relationships with nature. For us, this approach ensures that we will be aligned with future legislation and reporting frameworks. It responds to best practice guidance in this space from sector organisations and our partners such as the UK Green Building Council, Business in the Community and WWF. And it also responds to the expectations of our clients and our partners. So looking at this from a holistic approach enables to look at all 4 areas and prioritise action that delivers outcomes aligned with all of these 4 areas. And we work to do that across all aspects of our work, through our own offices, with our clients through the services and advice we provide, with our colleagues ensuring that they have the skills and resources they need to deliver for us and for our clients. Working with our suppliers, so we work in partnership to support them to develop their own climate action plans. We look at beyond in the community, so how do we work through volunteering and community engagement to deliver on these 4 key areas? We look at that through wider business and sector partnership, and we look at that through the use of data and technology as well. So I'm just going to zoom in on nature for now within those 4 areas. When I joined JLL, I had a remit to develop a nature strategy. And the ambition has always been that we do this in a way that both aligns with the global frameworks, such as the Task Force on Nature-related Financial Disclosure and Science-Based Targets, but also that really practically looks at where we can play a role in the protection and restoration of nature in the places that we operate. So we have that ambition to protect and restore the natural resources on which all life depends. And our approach is focused on the unique space that we operate in, so the built environment. So we've got an ambition to ensure that all of our approaches aim to rebuild that disconnect between the natural and built environment and between people and nature. And there are 5 principles that we apply, and these kind of ensure that this aspect of our climate action plan dovetails with all the rest. So our approach to nature will support the transition to a resilient net zero future. It's supporting that carbon ambition. It will enrich social value. It will focus on building urban resilience, prioritising nature-based solutions. It will incorporate efficient resource use, adopting circular approaches. And it will aim to enhance biodiversity and maximise the multiple benefits that come from that. Now, I'm going to apologise. This is a really dull slide, but it does show something that is really exciting from my perspective, because what we've also really started digging into within our sustainability work and our climate action work is what nature and biodiversity looks like in our own buildings and the communities that we operate in. So our approach to nature positive design and nature-based solutions across our own workplaces is quite challenging. We don't own many of the buildings we operate in, but we do work with landlords and we share our ambition and we take a site-specific approach to nature in the places where we work. So we have a 3-step approach, which I'm just going to go through in a minute, that looks at sort of nature-based solution strategy in a specific place. And this can be applied regardless of whether you're a developer, a local authority, corporate occupier, or a homeowner. But the first thing that you need to understand is what's on this slide. And on the right, we have an image of ecosystem services. So this is the fact that nature, the natural environment, nature-based solutions provide a whole range of benefits. And that this right-hand diagram looks at what's called ecosystem services. And essentially that's the benefits that nature provide to us. And these include things like provisioning services, such as providing clean water and resources, such as wood, through to cultural services, such as recreation, and regulating services, such as controlling flooding. But we also look at this in terms of buildings, which is very specifically, which is the list on the left. And also for me, we look at this in terms of language that resonates with my colleagues and the wider sector. So within here, we've got the fact that well-designed nature-based solutions in our towns and cities and around buildings can deliver a whole range of benefits. They can enhance health and well-being, they can improve air quality, they can increase property value, and much, much more. So we have these 23 benefits that we consider when we're developing our plans around nature-based solutions. So those 3 steps that we take when we're trying to apply nature-based solutions to our own portfolio and our own buildings. First of all, the first step is what really matters to you. That could be personally, but from our perspective, it's what matters to us within our corporate strategy. And that's why having this joined up climate action plan is really key. Because what we're able to do is look at those 23 benefits and rank them according to what aligns best with our sustainability strategy and our climate action plan. So for example, this could be for us that the really important things are achieving an energy efficient building, restoring biodiversity, engaging employees, and looking at wider health and well-being. So we rank those 23 against what's important to us at a strategic level. Once we've done that, we moved on to the second step, which is to apply that same ranking process to the nature-related opportunities or priorities on the specific site that we're looking at. So, for example, do we have outdoor space that we can exploit to restore biodiversity? Is it a space that we get a lot of visitors to and we could showcase innovative solutions? Are there other projects around? Is there a local nature recovery strategy? And what can help inform the real priorities that are specific to that location? And then the third step is to apply that same risk prioritization setting to those 23 points against site-specific risks. So is it a space that floods regularly in heavy rain? Is it an area of poor air quality? Or is it an area with very little green space? By looking through these 3 lenses, you can create a strategic approach to nature-based solutions that supports values, whether they're corporate or personal, and provides the most benefit for the place that you're operating in. By doing this, you can then inform plans for the types of nature-based solutions that deliver the real best outcomes against these priorities. So I'm just going to link that back to carbon again. For example, if achieving net zero and energy efficiency is one of your corporate priorities, which it quite likely is for any organisation that's looking at sustainability, then looking at how you use nature-based solutions to provide shade and insulate your building can be a really cost-effective way of increasing energy efficiency. This was exactly what Hannah was just talking about earlier as well. But as she said as well and pointed out, rather than just grey solutions, nature-based solutions can at the same time, and for very little additional charge potentially, improve health and well-being, enhance biodiversity, improve air quality, and create spaces that attract people. So it's not one or the other, it's about this holistic approach. It's about considering resilience as well as climate mitigation. And it's about considering nature as well as carbon. I do just have to mention, I think of nature-based solutions, I call them the Swiss Army knife or the multi-tool of solutions, because rather than a grey solution and just fixing one problem, they can deliver a whole range of benefits with just that one tool. So, getting started, it is hard. I appreciate that. And, you know, I've said that earlier. I want to give you some pointers on how and where to get started. And firstly, my personal approach to progressing in the sustainability space is very much not to let perfect get in the way of progress. As I said at the start, this is hard. There's a lot to consider. And very often people feel that they can't take action until they know definitively the right steps to take in the right order. But a lot of this is new space. We're only managing to progress through innovation and trial and error. And we really do need people to be bold to ensure that we can drive change at the pace that's needed. So with that in mind, I'm going to share some resources which I think are really helpful, but I would also encourage you just to start somewhere. Have a look on what is the biggest challenge or opportunity for your business. Is it resource efficiency? Is it physical flood risk or heat risk? Is it a lack of skills in this space? And start somewhere. And remember that every journey starts with just one step. So some of the best resources that I found, and none of these are mine, they're just ones that I found really helpful. So I just wanted to share with you today. The first is Business in the Community's 7 Steps for Climate Action. So they look at everything from net zero emissions through to embedding climate risks, looking at investing wisely in nature, measuring and reporting progress, embracing circularity, ensuring that skills are there again, and involving diverse stakeholders. There's a whole range of resources behind these 7 steps, but it's a really useful, simple starting place if you want to start taking this holistic approach. One of the resources that I've used quite recently as well is one of their route maps that they have behind this. So that's one on this comes from one on circular economy. And for me, that was a really useful starting point to look at how we incorporate circular economy into our sustainability plans in a really coherent and structured way. But they've also got a route map for green skills and for involving diverse stakeholders. The next resource I'm going to share is this one, which is from WWF, and that's Nature in Transition Planning. This is another really useful resource to have a look at. So WWF sit on the Transition Task Force, and we've worked with them around how we look at ensuring that nature can be embedded into those transition plans. And they've got a whole load of steps, both to look at sort of that starting level of going, how do we consider nature, all the way through to, at a higher level, ensuring that you've got really nature positive objectives that are really driving this space. The next resource I just want to share is this one from Business for Nature, which is brand new, well, fairly new this year, and there's a whole range of sector actions towards a nature positive future. And these are for a whole range of sectors. This is just 8 on this. There's more than that, but do take a look at those. And again, they give really useful actions and steps that you can take to progress towards a nature positive future. I have just got a couple more slides. I've got one more resource, and then I'm just going to summarize. So if you do have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A on the side. This is the last resource that I wanted to share because I want to try and ensure that we cover something from nature, circularity, risk and resilience. And this for me is something that really helped inform our risk and resilience planning. Hannah mentioned the resilience roadmap, I think that UKGBC are doing, and I think that's going to be a really key resource moving forward. But at the moment, the ukclimaterisk.org has UK guidance for businesses, which is a really useful starting point to help identify and mitigate some of the risks. So, just summarising what we went through. I do want to start at the point carbon is important. By saying we need to go beyond carbon tunnel vision, it's not saying we need to ignore carbon. We need to rapidly decarbonise the whole UK economy in order to limit global warming. But we can't do that at the exclusion of all else. So as everyone knows, we're already facing the effects of climate change. We're having flooding and extreme heat. And all climate action plans need to address this too. So we need to ensure that our plans also focus on building resilience to the changing climate, to changing legislation and changing economies. We also need to acknowledge that we face a biodiversity crisis due to unsustainable resource extraction, amongst other things. So we also need to consider nature and resource use within our plans. But the key thing I want you to take away is if we expand horizons and take a really holistic approach to climate action, we can open the door to a whole host of opportunities. We can drive positive change environmentally, socially, and economically. And we can all genuinely contribute to a just transition to a resilient, net zero, nature positive future. So that's what I wanted to go through today, but really happy to now take any questions.
Thanks so much. I thought that was really comprehensive in making the argument that we need to look beyond carbon. I wanted to know what you thought we were most missing. Is there one particular area that you think we are overlooking the most, or suppose a risk that we are overlooking the most?
I find it really hard, to be honest, because I kind of operate in a bit of an echo chamber sometimes. Most of the time I'm talking to lots of people who are on roughly the same page to a greater or lesser extent. So where I would have said, and I think it probably is, around nature and biodiversity, I talk to a lot of people who are beginning to understand that, and we're really getting to that point and taking it forward. But when I step out of my echo chamber and kind of talk to, whether it's my wider business or other colleagues, I think an understanding of the biodiversity crisis is still really low on a lot of people's radar. And the understanding that we need to address that concurrently in order to have a stable future, I think is a real challenge. And I think it's also, though, where people are starting to understand it, it's such a complex space that people are just feeling like they can't take action because they're a bit sort of paralyzed by so much going on, which comes back again to my point that's around, you don't have to do everything all at once, but just start looking more broadly at some of the areas that are really key for your business.
We talked earlier today, David Partridge talked about how people have woken up to the connection between energy efficiency and energy security and how that's moving the retrofit and other agendas forward. Do we have that lack of a connection for biodiversity? I mean, everybody thinks the bees and the birds are quite nicely, but they don't quite see that connecting into our own health and well-being.
Yeah, I think generally there's a lack of if I say lack of understanding, it sounds really patronizing, which it's really not. It's a very complex issue. And I think still, if I talk to a lot of people about buildings and biodiversity, they talk about beehives on roofs, which is a bit of a bugbear for many reasons. It's not that it's necessarily bad, but it's not solving a lot of things. And in some cases, it's really not necessarily helping where it should be. I think the biggest thing that people are starting to do, and there are increasing resources to help do that, is understanding really what your reliance and impact are on nature. So it's not just going, okay, we need to support biodiversity. Are you reliant on nature to ensure the resilience of your buildings, in the sense that, are you in an area where if you keep concreting it over, then you're going to flood year on year? And we need that natural environment. We need those trees to be kept in the ground. Or are you in an area that has significant resources that come from a supply chain that is particularly damaging to nature? Or are you in an area, it could be as simple as looking at a building going, are you in an area where there isn't access to green space for a lot of people who would really, really benefit from that, from those health and well-being perspectives? At a government level, it's really interesting to see now that this isn't just coming through sort of DEFRA and the environment side of things. It's also being seen in the levelling up agenda, and that ability to access green space is becoming really important. So, yeah, I think there's just a lack of awareness of quite what value and multiple benefits nature can bring.
Do you think ecosystem services is a more useful term then than biodiversity in some ways, because it's kind of maybe expands that understanding about what nature is doing for you?
I think language is a really key thing. I'll be honest, I'm not a massive fan of the term ecosystem services because, again, it feels really technical. And that's kind of why we created our own thing, being what are those benefits that nature delivers? But yes, I tend to talk about nature and biodiversity so that it's expanding that a bit more broadly. Biodiversity is a key aspect of that, but it's not all encompassing. I would love to say that there is a definitive way that we should talk about this that would engage people, but I don't think we've quite got there yet. So one of the things that I've always found, and I have a really weird sort of employment history. I started off as a comms person, so I used to be in communications. And actually one of the biggest strands that still goes through my work even now is looking at going, well, who am I talking to and what resonates with them? So it's making sure that when you're trying to engage people and bring them on board, that you talk about any of this in a language that will resonate. So I think it's as much that as necessarily saying one term is better than another, but it is about really understanding what will resonate with someone and what benefits or outcomes or services really kind of connect with people.
There's a question here from Joseph Baines from Sport London. How was JLL's action plan created? Is it organizationally led or community led? And is the action plan based on each JLL location, or is it one plan for all locations?
So where we are at the moment is we've created our overarching nature strategy, which is still kind of got the ink finally drying on it internally. So it's kind of there, but we're just finalizing how and where we set our full ambition around that. The climate action plan for our specific offices has been done very much at a site-specific level. But I say that process that I talked you through on those kind of 3 steps, that first step of ranking is the same for wherever our offices are. So the things that matter to us are the same wherever our offices are. But then what we've started doing is on our new offices, so where we've been moving into new places, where we have an opportunity to inform the fit out and selection of offices, we've then looked at that at a site specific level. We've got a big new planned office in London in a couple of years, and that's a place where we're going, okay, what can we trial and pioneer? And we've looked at specifically the biodiversity action plan there as one of the things. So black red starts and stag beetles are specific creatures and animals that we need to look at restoring. So that's something that we've gone, okay, well, that's something that we can align with. We also know it's an area of poor air quality. But actually, again, one of the things that it's not is it doesn't have big issues around noise. So we don't need to look at using nature to kind of provide insulation from a sound perspective. So there's a whole range of things that we're looking at, but we have taken that one approach. So we've got a big strategy. We've kind of then applied that to this kind of action plan for our individual offices. And then we're taking that overarching piece of work and going, well, how is that relevant at a site specific level?
You mentioned the challenges with offices of refitting and fit out. How is that being addressed? I realize we're back on the subject of net zero, but it is a huge issue. And how are you tackling that?
Specifically around just generic, the retrofit ambition across the whole sector. Yeah, it is really key. I think the biggest thing that I've noticed is we're getting increased recognition and ambition across many of our clients in that space. For us, it's fundamental, and we have really high ambitions around energy efficiency, embodied carbon within all of our own offices. But we are also seeing our clients starting to look at that as well. There is further that legislation needs to go. I think fundamentally it's a really hard space to operate in. And the recent announcements from Rishi Sunak around energy efficiency have made that, again, really challenging, because it is about partnership. There's very rarely one person who has responsibility for a building. So we need to kind of work together between landlords and tenants, looking at doing things at the best possible way. It is moving, and we're definitely getting there. What I'm trying to do, and we're beginning to kind of bring clients on as well, I'm primarily focused on us from an operational level, but looking at how we can drive that and support our client engagement as well. We are starting to look at going, well, if you're doing that, what are you trying to achieve at the same time, and how can you factor as many things into that? Because, those big capital expenditures are hard. If you're going to do that, you kind of want to do it once. So make sure that you're horizon scanning and can do the most efficient transitions as you can at this point in time. So there are a huge range of tools and guidance around fit outs and retrofit. There's a lot of ambition. I think we just need to keep pushing and accelerating that in the built environment.
And in terms of those kind of repeated fit outs, or this idea that leases are growing shorter, and people have this idea that they come into an office, they're going to strip everything out, they're going to do it all over again. Is there a culture shift happening, or are we still in that? Are we still ripping out the kitchens and putting them in again in a different color?
I think we are. I think there are people choosing not to, and we're getting there. And that's one of the things. That's the concept from my perspective, well, around a really circular approach, rather than just focusing on waste. If you're talking about circularity, is how are you designing spaces? So we've very much looked at going, okay, well, we've got spaces that we can use and move and change around. So if we're changing offices, we'll go, what can we take into it? And that's not just going, what can we take in the sense of like desks? It's like partitions and ceiling insulation and all of those different bits is what's transferable. There's still one of the things that we started looking at is urban mining. So going out and understanding what is still available from, if one building is being taken down, what's available to be put into another building. And that space is really exciting. I mean, it's really exciting space being, but it's very, very new. So material passporting and sort of urban mining is there, and it's a concept, and there are people buying into it, but it's very, very nascent, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. And there's huge potential, but yeah, I don't think we're there yet, unfortunately.
There's a question from Claire Daly, who's head of policy and communications at Suster & Scotland, asking about transport. So it may be out of scope and outside the realm of biodiversity, but in your climate action plan for JLL, are you considering travel to and from the offices?
100%. So yeah, and that's another aspect, and that's brilliant that, any of these things coming into it. We have a kind of a couple of things, and there are two areas I'm really focusing on at the moment. One is around transport, so whether that's to and from offices or whether that's to and from client meetings. And then the other thing that we really look at is around sustainable living for our clients. Not for our clients, for our employees. So looking at what we can do to support them to live more sustainably outside of the workplace. So from a travel perspective, we have targets against that. We look at the emissions from our business travel. We look at how we engage our employees on when they're in the office and when they're not. And that's a real challenging time post-COVID. We have a lot more flex, and there are significant advantages of not being in the office all the time. However, we work in the world of real estate, and we also know there are significant advantages of being in the office. So we do look at how we kind of balance that tension. But yeah, it's a key aspect. And again, it's one of those things that you're going, well, if that's actually something that from your own organization is a real challenge, take that as your starting point and go, okay, that's something I'm going to look at today. So, I mean, we have things like an electric vehicle salary sacrifice scheme and cycle to work and all of those things. But we also look at practical behavior change around driving, active travel and walking to work as well. But yeah, very much a really key aspect of it.
We had a comment from Sam Veal yesterday from Igloo. She said, what gets measured gets done. So what are the roles of metrics and measurement in achieving your goals?
Yeah, this is one of those areas that, and I find really challenging. I cannot disagree at all. Fundamentally, you need to baseline, and you need to measure it. And that's one of the things that we do on all aspects. So we're looking at that around, obviously, our carbon transition plan. We've looked at that very, very carefully, and we record and monitor and look at that on a quarterly basis. We do set quite robust targets against metrics that we can look at. So whether that's around circularity and the use of reused items, the amount of embodied carbon that we're looking at, mapping that against previous fit outs to where we are now and seeing how we can reduce it. I think the reason I don't see it as purely black and white is I think sometimes people are limited by that view that you can only do something if you can measure it. I agree that that is the most efficient and effective way to do things and the most transparent and governable way of doing something. But particularly with things around nature and some of these things around, for example, material transporting and things like that, at the moment, it's new space. And the only way that you kind of create that critical mass is people being brave enough to try things and going, okay, this is what we think will happen. This is where we are. It's where we think we will get to. And going, oh yeah, we didn't. That wasn't quite what we thought was going to happen. Or actually, yes, that is what happens. And now we have a framework and a metric that other people can apply. So maybe it's kind of that 80-20 rule is that, even go, the majority of it, yes, we need metrics. And all of this, we have public targets, we have internal targets, we have ambitions on how we get there. And we want to report and be public and transparent about everything we're doing. But then we have this space that's about going, this is what we know is right, but we can't necessarily put something on it at the moment. Nature and nature-based solutions is a prime example on our own businesses. The DEFRA metric for biodiversity net gain or the urban greening factor are both metrics that can be applied, but they don't really show what we're trying to achieve within doing that. They don't kind of go far enough to show all of those benefits. So for us at the moment, we're going, okay, we're going to create a framework that means we can track it and we can monitor it and we can see, but it's quite likely to be RAG rated. So, red, amber, green, rather than a specific number, because we want to be able to innovate and pioneer and push it. And hopefully by us and similar organizations doing that, we may get to a point where you have got industry standards. And that's why organizations like the UK Green Building Council, again, are kind of pulling together this, and the resilience roadmap will hopefully help provide metrics around some of that. So yeah, again, it goes back to don't let perfect get in the way of progress, but equally 100% we need transparency, we need clear governance, we need clear frameworks, and we need to avoid greenwashing. We don't want to just go and go, we did this, it was amazing. And if we can't prove and evidence that, we don't want to be seen to be doing that. So yeah, it's a tricky space to navigate sometimes. But yeah, I do think be brave sometimes, and we need people who are prepared to maybe fail and learn occasionally in order to be able to drive forward innovation.
I mean, you have your slide that says we can't do everything, but I think increasingly, on the other hand, you have the slides that kind of show that we need to do everything. So it's that difficult balance. I like your line about perfection getting in the way of progress, but I guess it's I think that feeling of overwhelm. It can be an exciting feeling in that, I can tackle multiple issues. And like you said, the Swiss Army tool of nature-based solutions, but the problems can be overwhelming. And the climate grief and that kind of analysis paralysis can really kind of build frustration, I think, around the boardroom when you're kind of looking to kind of make the right decision and you're sitting there saying, but if we do this, here's the impact of that and here's the impact for that. I mean, do you have any advice really, in that kind of team meeting where it feels like you're just hitting a block after block or hurdle after hurdle, both internal hurdles and external hurdles? How do you push through that the impossibility of perfection to a place of action and progress?
I It's a really good question. And that does kind of sum up a large part of my working life, to be honest, is a lot of those challenging conversations. And genuinely, I joined JLL 18 months, 20 months ago. And when I started, the concept of actually being able to deliver this nature strategy, even though we had a target and an ambition for me to do it, when I was talking to our exec, that was a bit like, okay, they're glazing over. We're not there. How do I move you through? I think there's a couple of key things that I would recommend. One is focus on the things that are material to you. Now, that may be through a really, really robust materiality assessment, but equally, it might just be through an agreement with that exec board on going, okay, well, what are the areas where we think are important? Where do we know that we impact most or we are most impacted? Where can we take action? Understanding that is really key. If you can't do everything, look at where you can make the biggest difference, and focus on that. I think the second thing I would say is looking back to that kind of language piece. I am utterly passionate about nature and biodiversity and creating green spaces because I think they're really important and I love them, and the planet relies on them. CFOs generally probably less interested in that stuff. So from my perspective, if I'm putting forward a case for something, it's constantly understanding what that part of the strategy, how it relates to someone, whether that's by de-risking future income loss, whether it's by increasing the resilience of investment, whether it's about generating new income streams. I think sometimes that feels like it's almost a dirty, it's a bit of a dirty word to go, how do we approach that from a sort of financial perspective? But it's understanding who's in the room and understanding what matters to them rather than just constantly going, but this is obvious, we should be doing, we have to do this, it's the most important thing. So understanding how you create that business case and what resonates with people, I think is really, really key to bringing people on board. And then thirdly, I think it's finding those spaces where you can do something. It might only be small and going, okay, well, let's try this. And then you kind of go, okay, now I've got the evidence or I've got an example where I can show this. So yeah, sometimes it's a bit of going, okay, I want to do this, but I can maybe do this at the moment. Okay, let me do this. And then I can take that and show you where it's gone. It's pushing in the places that matter most, so what's most material, but also where you can actually drive change at this point. Because I would be blinkered if I said that any organization can just go out and work on all of these areas. Now we know that resources are tight. It's a tricky economic climate. There's a lot of limitations on what can and can't be done. So yeah, pick your battles maybe.
Interesting, because Sam Veal actually showed us that kind of chart, and she said we focus over here, which was biggest impact, hardest to deliver, and saying that's where we start, which I think is that that top right quadrant is the things that are material to you. Where can you actually make a significant difference? Where will it take a bit of effort? Because if it's easy, just do it.
Yeah.
And then I think that the point about you're changing your message depending on who's around the table, it's like the opposite of greenwashing. You're like blue washing the message and kind of saying, how does this make business sense, or how does this make why will this make your job easier or your deliverable easier, or reduce vacancy rates or increase the well-being or whatever that person's professional priority is. Ensuring, and that might be the comms people saying we'll win a bunch of awards, but none of them are disingenuous, really.
Completely. And I genuinely think it is that piece, and I think that's part of our role as sustainability practitioners, is one, to understand where we can make a change and what is important and what we can do in creating this sort of strategic approach. But it's also our role to go, how does this relate to the business that I operate within? How do I make that resonate? And it makes it really hard, and I don't get it right all the time. I would be lying if I did. And I still have battles that sometimes feel like I'm going, I can't believe I'm still having this conversation around X or Y. But that is that challenge of going, you really need to engage. When we talk about engaging diverse stakeholders, that is literally everything from the communities we operate within, through to, finance officers, HR directors, chief execs, and kind of everything in between.
And many climate scientists have felt like they've had a failure of communication. So we need something that we need to get better at really quickly. That's actually the end of our session, sadly. So round of emoji applause, please, for Amanda Skeldon. Thank you so much for being here and sharing your roadmap and your way of thinking with all of us. And we'll be back in 10 minutes with our session on land use planning and policy. We're going to be digging into some more communication and decision-making strategies and a real focus on integrated planning this time. So not so much internally, but citywide, getting things to be Swiss Army knives, more Swiss Army knives
Yes.
progress. So thank you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Christine. Take care.